Shannon, what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about divorce, domestic violence, and narcissism. And first of all, we just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. My name is Shannon and I'm part of the community engagement and events team at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. I'm going to start with some introductions and let you know what's on the agenda for today before passing things over to our panelists. You'll notice that the chat box has been disabled, and this is just to ensure that all attendees remain anonymous to other audience members. However, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can send them in through the Q&A, or you can email me at shannon@russellalexander.com, and I'll make sure to put my email in the chat for your reference as well. So we also just ask that you please keep in mind that this presentation is intended to provide general information on the topic of divorce, domestic violence, and narcissism, and should not be construed as legal and/or clinical advice. So to let you know what's on the agenda today, in this 1-hour presentation, our panelists will be discussing the following topics. What is domestic violence? What is narcissism? The dark side of Zoom divorce, DV and risks to vulnerable spouses, screening for DV and asking the right questions, managing DV files, communication post-separation and power imbalances, parenting plans, restraining orders, counselors and therapists. And lastly, we have technology on the agenda today. And then we'll also have a Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. So if you haven't already, please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to those questions during the presentation. We've had a really great turnout today and lots of questions that have come in, but we'll do our best to get through as many as we can during that
I think
portion.
we set a record today, right? 250 registered almost?
Yeah, really great turnout. So thank you everyone for being here. I also just want to note before we get into introductions that I'll be providing links to some resources on today's topic that is mentioned throughout the presentation in a follow-up email tomorrow, so you can keep an eye out for that. And so without further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce today's hosts. We have Michelle Mulchin, Allison Gardner, Karen Guthrie-Douse, and Russell Alexander. So Michelle has been practicing family law for over 10 years, specializing in divorce, custody access, property division, child and spousal support, and family responsibility office enforcement matters. Her focus is on creating comprehensive, creative resolutions to family law matters, and Michelle excels at helping clients deal with complex financial issues that arise as a result of separation. Next, we have Allison, and Allison is an experienced child and family therapist, collaborative family professional, separation and divorce consultant, and a custody and access assessor. Allison is trained in narrative, solution-oriented, and mindfulness-based therapy strategies, and she is also a panel member with the Office of the Children's Lawyer. Next, we have Karen, and Karen has been a social worker for the past 32 years and has operated a private practice for 22 years. She specializes in collaborative practice, custody and access, separation and divorce, parenting plans, and voice of the child reports. She provides parent coaching and consultation to families and professionals. And Russell, we have, Russell is the founder and senior partner of Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. With over 20 years of experience, Russell uses his knowledge and expertise in collaborative family law with a client-focused approach by creating unique solutions for each of his clients. So now that you know a little bit more about our panelists today and what we have on the agenda, I'm going to pass things over to Russ to get started with the presentation.
Great stuff. Thank you, Shannon. So we do have a new book at Zoom Divorce. You're going to be able to learn how you can get a free digital copy. It's being released May 9th. So keep your eye out for that. Let's run our first poll, Shannon, because everybody knows I love polls. So what's your reason for joining us today? While we're waiting for answers, just a few housekeeping matters. Lots of feedback we've got about polls, so we're making it more interactive. Please send us your thoughts in terms of what the questions and answers are. Please put questions into the chat box. We're going to get through a bunch of questions today. A lot came in advance, so we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. We do have a petition that we started to keep family court hearings remote. Shannon's going to put a link to that in the chat box. Also, we have a live press conference on that issue next week. You'll see that link for next week. But enough of me talking. Let's see what the poll results are. What's your reason for joining us today? All right, so legal professional, 39%, other professional, 23%, currently going through separation and divorce, 24%, loved one going through separation and divorce, 5%, other one, please put in the chat, 10%. So probably a majority of professionals here today with lots of members of the public. So thank you for answering that. We've got a lot to cover off. We're going to do our best to do it in 1 hour. Big overview today. We might do a second part of this series if it's a popular one, taking a deeper dive into some specific issues. But let's make a start. Domestic violence. What are we looking at here, Allison?
Thanks. So in order to talk about domestic violence and divorce in the legal community in general, we thought it would be helpful to just start a brief overview of what it is. I want to emphasize it is a brief overview because we do have a very heavy agenda. And if you want more details, please access the resources that I believe Shannon will be sending you tomorrow. So what is intimate partner violence, also called domestic violence? Well, it refers to abuse and violence directed by one partner to the other. It can be in current or former intimate relationships. It's about behavior, and behavior specifically designed to control and dominate the other partner. It can include physical, psychological, sexual, emotional, financial, verbal, social abuse, and intimidation. It's important to note that it can occur between current as well as former spouses, dating partners, and ongoing sexual partners. So while the research does show it is predominantly perpetrated by men against women, I do want to note that anyone can be a victim or the perpetrator of intimate partner violence. It also occurs among heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transgender individuals and couples, and across all socioeconomic, cultural, racial, education, and religious backgrounds. And I really think that's important to bear in mind when we are meeting with clients, because I know our clients bring a whole variety in regards to that backgrounds and their experiences. So there are sort of three primary categories. I'm just going to outline them briefly and speak to them very briefly. And again, if you want to get more detail about them, please refer to the resources because there's a really great list that's coming your way. So the first one's called minor isolated violence. The other one is victim resistance. And the third one is controlling coercive violence, which is usually the one that most people are familiar with because that's typically what we see in the media, movies, social media, and that's what's portrayed. So minor isolated violence really refers to violence that's not associated with the pattern. It's not repetitive and typically does not cause lingering fear or harm. Victim resistance can happen when violence is used as a response to a perceived threat. And often in the area of divorce, family law, we can see it when sometimes people are attempting to escape or leave a relationship. The coercive controlling violence, what I want to emphasize here, it's a pattern. And that's really where people need to be concerned if they're hearing indication of that within relationships. And it's really can be physical violence, nonviolent. So very quickly, I know I don't have a lot of time. Why is it important that family law practitioners ask questions about it? Because often you are the first point of contact for survivors. So it's important for you to identify, if there was or is risk identified with the intimate partner violence. Also, there's evidence that it can be heightened during divorce or separation, and often just the commencement of adults further at risk. So, screening, but from here, we're going to move to Russ.
Great stuff. You did throw it for a quick second there, but you're back. Thank you, Alison. Let's do the second poll. So which of the below character traits are associated with narcissistic personality disorder? And when we're waiting for everybody to answer, I'm going to throw a question at you, Alison, that came in. What is the difference between intimate partner violence and family violence?
Great question. I'm glad someone raised that. So the definition of family violence versus intimate partner violence, it extends beyond violence with intimate partners. So it can be directed at any individuals within family systems that cause someone to be fearful. And with children specifically, I want to raise, it can also be direct or indirect exposure to such contact within a family. So what I mean by that, it can be violence between siblings, adolescents, adult children to their parents, parent-in-laws to their children-in-law. And again, similar to IPV, which is, I'm speaking to the intimate partner violence, it can happen in any families of any culture, socioeconomic class, or religion.
Thank you for that. All right, let's see what our poll results are. Sense of self-importance, 21%. Entitlement, 19%. Unquestioning compliance, 18%. Inability to recognize needs of others, 22%. Preoccupied with fantasies about power, brilliance, or a perfect mate. So 16%, fairly evenly spread out answers. I suppose the correct answer is all of the above. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So what is narcissism? This is a clinical definition that we found, and we'll put the slide up here and give you the actual definition. Narcissistic personality disorder, one of several types of personality disorders, is a mental condition in which people have an inflated sense of their own importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, troubled relationships, and a lack of empathy for others. But behind this mask of extreme confidence lies fragile self-esteem that's vulnerable to the slightest criticism. So that is the definition that we have in the textbook. Let's do a quick poll here, and then what are the causes? Let's see. So what are the causes of narcissistic personality disorder? Give everybody a moment to answer this question, but Michelle and I, it seems like every other new client we get says, my spouse is a narcissist, and then they're prepared to spend tens of thousands of dollars to prove it. Has that been your experience, Michelle?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it is very difficult when you actually do get a narcissist, either as a client or on the other party. But, you know, there is a clinical diagnosis definition that we as family lawyers, we cannot make that diagnosis, but we can absolutely help our clients if they're dealing with this type of personality disorder.
And it's curious because they think that it's somehow there's going to be some magic result, or they're going to be, their views are going to be confirmed by the court, and that's going to affect the outcome of the case. But it usually doesn't, in my experience. What's been yours, Michelle?
No, absolutely not. You know, family court is not the proper place to diagnose these types of conditions. We can absolutely help clients through this. And if we can't do it, we have lots of resources that we can point them through. But a judge is not going to make a clinical diagnosis on, you know, the dais or at a conference. It just, unfortunately, that's not our place.
All right. Thanks. Let's see our poll results. Well, all of the above, still unknown, and a few percentages for the other ones. I think all of the above is certainly an accurate summary of that result. So let's get into screening for domestic violence and asking the right questions. So what's your advice here, Allison? What do you suggest?
Okay. So why screen? It's really important people screen, and the reason people need to screen is because you really need to understand your client's experience from their perspective of their relationship with their former partner, and any sort of intimate risk or concern they may raise for themselves or for the children. The reason for that is because this helps you to design a process that's hopefully or will be safe and effective, and hopefully allow the client to engage and feel prepared. And also for you, then you can also address some of the power sensitive options that perhaps you could offer. An example, if there is mediation happening, perhaps you could do shuttle mediation. If someone wants to have a support person present, they could have a support person there with them. So there's lots of ways to sort of address that. As far as tools, one of the ones I believe that we referenced in the resources was the BASIC, which I personally think is very comprehensive, and I'd invite everyone to familiarize themselves with it. It's got great questions that you can refer to and use within your intakes. Even if you don't use all the questions, it's a really helpful tool for you to begin a discussion with your clients about the potential of intimate partner violence. The other thing I would say is that some of the questions can be uncomfortable. People might say when they are asking their clients, if you do reviews, they're quite direct. And some people I know have shared that. But in my experience, clients do really appreciate the fact that you take the time to look into those issues so you can provide them the best comprehensive service you can. Again, the only thing I want to say, just because I know I don't have a lot of time, is the screening tools are meant to complement your professional judgment. It's not a replacement.
So we're going to go to our fourth poll, and I did jump the dark side of Zoom divorce. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But first, who are most affected by a narcissistic personality disorder? So let's give everybody a moment to answer that question. And I'm going to throw a question at you, Karen, that came in from our audience. I want my child to see a therapist about our divorce, but my ex-spouse doesn't agree with therapy for children. Can I still send my child to a therapist and not tell my ex-spouse if I pay for it? So how would you approach that issue?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that a little later in the presentation, but generally, no, you need both parents' permission for a child under the age of 12 years old to be in therapy. And sometimes if people have been through the court process and they have, a final order that they have final decision-making capability, then yes, they can send their child to a therapist. However, as somebody who, sees children in my private practice, one of the things I always want to try to do is to reach out to both parents to understand, what the issues are from their perspective. Even if one parent is not going to be involved in the therapy, at least having them informed of what's happening, it often provides for a better outcome, right?
Yeah, okay. Let's share our poll results. I got a quick question for you, Michelle. Would domestic violence tort claims for damages be filed in family court moving forward because of the recent ruling in March 22?
That's a good question. So I've heard, and I have not seen it, that case is being appealed. So as of now, the answer is yes, but let's wait and see. This is one of those cases that I think personally may be sent all the way up. And I think that it's going to be very interesting as lawyers and as professionals to see what happens in this case. And I think it'll open up a huge, new, interesting subsection of family law.
I would include it and withdraw the claim later, depending on what happens at the Court of Appeal, or pursue it. So it is a great question. The more interesting question is, do you flip it over to a personal injury lawyer? Or are they permitted to do contingency fees in family court because that's prevented, right? So that's kind of an interesting argument that needs to be fleshed out.
That's it. I think we're so new into this that there's going to be so much that we have to figure out.
Right. So 28% men, 16% women, 56% both. I think the studies lean more towards men than women from our understanding. So
the studies have shown it's mostly men who are more at risk of having narcissistic personality
So
disorder.
thank you for everybody sending in your questions. Let's go to the dark side because it is May 4th, right? May the 4th be with you. The dark side is Zoom divorce and domestic violence and risks to vulnerable spouses. Well, despite all the silver linings and efficiencies that Zoom divorce has given us over the past 2 years, including saving court time and expense, there is an unfortunate dark side to this, and this is victims of domestic violence. Studies suggest that it's on the rise. If they're in the home with the abuser, obviously it makes it much more difficult to access support networks and services that would otherwise be available to them if they attend the courthouse in person, including court security and other support people. Screening processes fall through the cracks oftentimes when it's done virtually, and there's a real risk of intimidation. We're going to include a lot of information in the show notes at the end of today's presentation, including a reference to a case where the victim of domestic violence was testifying at a criminal trial. The prosecutor noticed that something was strayed, and the person who was defending the charge was in her home at the time of her testimony, intimidating her. They sent the police over. He was arrested during the trial. And this is just one of many examples of the dark side of all this technology, right? These people aren't being protected and they're not being able to access the services that would ordinarily be available to them. So we'll have a link to that particular case in the show notes, but it can be really quite disturbing. Let's go to our final poll, and then we're going to get into a lot more substance here. So what does the narcissistic personality disorder when does the narcissistic personality disorder usually begin? All right, and let's go, while we're waiting for everybody to vote, let's see if we can pull up some quick questions. One question that came in is screening a recent development and mediation in the law. Who wants to take that one? Karen?
Sure. I don't think screening is a recent development. I think more and more professionals are being trained and being aware that they need that training. And most of our colleagues have taken domestic violence training and understand that perhaps lawyers aren't the people who are doing the screening, but they know to refer their clients to mental health professionals or family professionals who can do that screening. So,
great. One more. What strategies are different when divorcing a narcissist? Who wants to take a crack at that one? Safety plan?
I think we could spend an hour and a half on that one, but we actually have a lot of that coming up.
Okay.
So let's save it. Let's not.
Go back to that.
Yeah.
Let's get our poll results here, please. All right. So fairly good spread, majority teenage years and early adulthood. So what is the answer to this question? Who has it handy?
Oh, I do. Yes. So it's absolutely teenage years and early adulthood is usually when these things generally arise. Young children, I saw a note that young children do sometimes have these things. And I have an 18-month-old who absolutely thinks that she is the center of everyone's universe. But that's just children and they'll grow out of it. But it mostly presents in the teenage and early adulthood years.
Yeah, I'd be a little concerned if someone was diagnosing a toddler-age children with a narcissistic personality disorder.
Temper tantrum. Okay, you narcissist.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a bit early. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your votes. I think we're at managing domestic violence files. I think you've got this one, Michelle. Is that right?
I do. Thanks so much. So First of all, I really think that early referrals are very important, whether it's to a lawyer, a mediator, a collaborative team, but having that early intervention is very, very important. I saw a statistic and I couldn't find it again to figure out exactly where it came from, but people who are embroiled in a domestic violence situation are usually most at harm in the first 2 to 3 weeks after a separation. And that's so scary. You know, I myself have been involved in a number of files where things have happened, where the police have been involved, and it's always that first little period. So my best advice is, you know, get these people in quickly, do your screening. If you are a lawyer and you don't feel comfortable doing the screening, make sure that you have resources. At our firm, we have a social worker on team. We have access to a number of wonderful individuals, including Allison and Karen, who we can refer clients out to, counselors, family counseling, children's therapists. It's important to have these people in your Rolodex, I think I'm dating myself. There's no longer Rolodexes.
The Rolodex, what's that?
I think I still have one from when I first began.
Do you have a dial-up phone too? When the one
you know, I'm dating myself, unfortunately. So the unfortunate part is that it's my experience that these cases are usually longer, usually more expensive, usually more difficult. So my advice is to find someone who has experience in domestic violence cases and who has been through it, who can either mentor you or who can give you advice as to what to do, because there's a lot that comes up, and it usually comes up quickly. It sometimes comes up in the middle of the night and you're trying to deal with this with clients. Allison, I think you were the one who pointed out the MASIC, the Mediator's Assessment of Safety Issues and Concerns. That is great. It is very detailed. Again, as lawyers, this isn't something that if you need to do a proper screening, you know, make sure you refer to the professionals. If you think there are domestic violence issues and you get that sense, it's good for you to know, but also realize that this is not our training. This is not what we are trained for. We're not the best people to help our clients. You want to make sure that you have a team that you can refer to. Russ, did you have a question?
I think that's the great thing about a collaborative practice full team, right? We can get a family professional involved to do the screening. Let us know if there's domestic violence. Give us a plan on how we can address it. Maybe do shuttle collaborative. So I was just going to agree that's a fantastic practice tip, Michelle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Russ. If you are doing those initial consultations, with every single consultation, you have to ask the hard questions, you know, because you have to know. Be gentle. These are really horrific things that these people have gone through. So, you know, take time, take space. It doesn't all have to happen in the same first half-hour consultation that you have. And you may need to spread this over several sessions. You also need to understand that your client may take some time to trust you and to open up, and that's completely normal. That's completely fine. You want to make sure that they're coming to you, that they're comfortable with what's going on. If you're a client looking for a lawyer, I would also say make sure that you have a bit of a personal repertoire with that person. You're going to, unfortunately, be sharing some really difficult parts of your life with that person, and you want to make sure that you feel empathy, you feel like they're taking your situation at face value, that they understand that they have some expertise and that they're going to ultimately help you. You don't, you know, you hear horror stories about people saying the judge or the lawyer or the other lawyer just didn't really believe me. And that's heartbreaking to me. In terms of safety, if I do find out that there's a domestic violence situation, I always walk my clients through their safety plan. So it's not a one size fits all. Give them resources. I always tell my clients, you know, about resources in their area, to call the police if something happens, letting them know about counseling, but just making sure that they feel safe in their situation, in their home, in their circumstances. And if they don't, what they can do or what they should do when things go awry. So the next thing we're going to talk about is communication. So there's really 3 types of communication. So one is between, counsel and the other party or the other lawyer. And it's one of those things that I prefer to have a telephone conversation. I think that, you don't want to be calling the other, writing the other lawyer and saying that the other party has done X, Y, and Z before trying to at least have that telephone conversation and see if you can work together. It is already such a complicated, difficult, horrible situation that if you can work collaboratively, or even not in the collaborative setting, but together to help both these parties, it's going to be in everyone's best interest. There's also the communication between parties themselves while they're going through these situations. And again, it's not a one size fits all. Every situation is different. So know your options. There could be situations where there's no communication. There could be situations where there's communication through writing, either in email, text, or a third-party tool like our Family Wizard or Talking Parents. And then lastly, I've talked about this a lot, but coaching and counseling, I find that it's really important in domestic violence situations where you get that counseling, those third-party helpers immediately. And lots of people have plans through their EA system where the counseling is paid for by your work plan. So those are all important things to know as lawyers and as professionals, and to tell your clients.
Couple of questions for you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody, for sending your questions in, and please keep them up. If a client is traumatized by a former intimate partner and cannot show up in person for conferences, trial, etc., what other options are there?
So we're presupposing that we are at a trial or conference. If we're at a conference, and if it's a case conference, so the first time that you're going to court, you could actually write to the court by a 14D motion and ask for the client to be either not in attendance, or maybe they're in attendance, but it's virtual, and so their screen can be off. I've also seen judges give permission for the client to be in the room with the lawyer, but not on camera. And the judge has the ultimate decision with respect to how they're going to deal with that file. But lawyers and other professionals can give suggestions to help the judge make that decision.
I've found judges to be very accommodating in terms of ensuring everybody feels comfortable and safe. One more quick one. How does a spouse settle a family law case when the other spouse has made allegations and the other spouse is now in a criminal case as well? Should the criminal case be settled before the family law case, or the other way around? It's all very complicated.
It is incredibly complicated, and unfortunately, it is a case-by-case scenario. With respect to the money part of your case, so this is your financial statement, equalization payment, and depending on if they're children or what's going on with the family violence, child and spousal support, those things don't have to wait for the criminal case. And even parenting, if the parties can agree, or if the court finds that there's enough evidence to make a decision, that can also be done without the criminal case. But again, every case is different. And in some cases, you may want to wait until the criminal matter is done. And in some cases, it may be impossible to wait because, as we know, I think the criminal system is even more backed up than the family system. And it could be 3 to 4 years before we have a trial. So in the interim.
It also may depend on the nature of the allegations, right? If it goes to somebody's ability to parent, there could be a damages claim for tort. Sometimes criminal cases are resolved fairly quickly. So yeah, it all depends on the facts of each case. Okay, so thank you for that, Michelle. Let's talk about parenting plans. Karen?
And that's a great segue from that question, Russ, into parenting plans, because often when there are criminal charges, we know that that often does delay the resolution of a case. But one thing that parents can do with the assistance of their counsel or a family professional is work on a parenting plan. And a parenting plan is a written document that outlines how parents will raise their children following separation and divorce. And it includes parenting time schedules, decision-making about health, education, religion, and extracurriculars, how those decisions are going to be made, communication between parents, mobility issues, and dispute resolution mechanisms. And especially in files where domestic violence has been a factor or just a high conflict file, the more detail in a parenting plan, the better. Because really it is almost like the rules, right? That when, parents are going along and, dividing their time with their children, if a dispute comes up, they can refer back to their parenting plan and see what they agreed to and try to resolve it that way. And so again, the more specific things are set out, the better. So for example, holiday time is often an area of dispute between people, because especially when you have young children, most people want to see their children on significant holidays. So for example, Christmas, having that time spelled out, saying that, on December 24th at 4 p.m. with parent A dropping off the child until December 26th at 4 p.m. with parent B picking up the child, right? The more specific, the better, rather than just saying, well, the parents will divide the Christmas holidays, right? That's going to lead to a dispute, right? And it's very interesting, in my practice, how I've seen parenting plans evolve. In one of my most recent cases, one of the things involved in the parenting plan was if the family dog was going to accommodate the children between each parent's homes. So often we get things about belongings going back and forth, but in this family, they needed it to be spelled out where the dog was going to go. So in terms of creating a parenting plan, often that is something that in a collaborative file, your family professional will meet with the parents and do those plans. And that plan, after being reviewed by the lawyers, becomes part of their separation agreement. If often parents may want to work on it on their own, and there's some great online tools, which again are going to be in the show notes, that people can look at through the AFCC Ontario or the Department of Justice. So, and again, people can work with, their family professional to help them with that, or they can, start to work it out themselves. So, in terms, I just want to speak about, because, our presentation today is centering on domestic violence, is that often people are very concerned about exchanging children when there's been intimate partner violence. And there are several mechanisms that people can use to exchange children. So, and I'm speaking about these from what I would call the most intrusive to the least intrusive method. So most intrusive is for children to be exchanged at a supervised access center where, parent A drops the children off, waits for the other parent to arrive, take the children, and then the other parent leaves, so that there's absolutely no contact between the parents, and it's a professional person ensuring that the exchange has gone smoothly. If a supervised access center isn't available to do that, sometimes people hire a private third-party professional to, again, supervise exchanges in a safe way. Other methods of exchanging children are using an agreed upon family member or friend to exchange the child. Often that may occur in a community location, such as, Tim Hortons, the community center. Often, again, a great time to ensure that there isn't contact between parents is in your parenting plan, having that children are being picked up and dropped off at school, right? And, sometimes that presents a challenge in the summer months when school isn't in session. But if the children are in summer camps, children can be picked up and dropped off from camp, or, some other mechanism might need to be put in place. One question that people often ask or they suggest is that people do exchanges at police stations. And, in some very extreme cases, that may be something that's considered. However, I always think of it from the perspective of the child, and I really don't encourage people to do exchanges at police stations. First of all, for the message that gives the child. And second of all, most police stations don't actually know that you're there in their parking lot exchanging children, right? It's not something that police often want to get involved in. And people believe that it's a place of safety, but they really don't know what's going on in their parking lot unless, there's been some discussion with the police that is with that certain police force that's going to happen. So.
Thank you. Great tips. Thank you, Karen. Let's do some real quick Q&A. Want to be mindful of our time. So does violence in domestic violence always refer to physical violence? Well, no, the Divorce Act has a very exhaustive list of all characteristics of violence. It's not necessarily physical. Look for our resources on that. They're going to be included in the show notes. So thank you for that question. We could spend an hour talking about that one. Another question I want to get to here. What is the average amount of domestic violence tort compensation that courts have awarded so far? This is a rather novel area, and it was a fairly extreme case where they did make that award. Hopefully we'll get some direction from the Court of Appeal, but I haven't seen a scale or other cases to that effect. Have you, Michelle?
No, that decision came out fairly recently, and because cases take so long, if someone were to be pleading that today, we likely wouldn't have a trial decision for 2 or 3 years from now. Right. So it's coming, and we'll be very interested to see how this goes.
These are great and really important questions, so thank you. I want to get to one more. Anger management versus PAR. Do either work? Is one better than the other? Does PAR still require referral from the criminal court? I think that's a program run by John Howard. Does anybody know the answer to that question? We will find it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they need a go ahead, Michelle.
No, go ahead, Allison. Sorry.
So I'm not sure if you do need a referral, but if someone is in need of some counseling or some intervention around anger management, managing sort of emotional outbursts, certainly PAR does offer a great program. From my understanding, a lot of clients that I work with have utilized the services, but I'm not sure if you do need a referral or not.
Thank you for that. So restraining orders, let's take a look at the criminal court language. So this is another tool that we can access through the courts in terms of protecting people who have been victims of domestic violence and ensuring that they stay safe. We're going to include these screenshots as part of the show notes today. So this is standard language that we would see in a criminal court. The family court restraining order is slightly different. this is standard language we would see, 500 meters away. Separation agreements also include similar provisions. But Michelle has some important practice tips about modifying these and making them better. What do you suggest, Michelle?
Absolutely. So as always, we try to customize it to your situation. So for instance, the draft order here that says that Bugs Bunny will not come within 500 meters of Jessica, Amanda, and Benjamin, I would actually put in the addresses. I would put in the names of the, let's say the kids are babysat by grandma every day. I would put in that address as well. I would make it very clear because, any place that they're known to live or work is a bit of a problematic issue for police officers. They want certainty. They want specific addresses so that when these things come up, they can actually charge someone. So I would go in and put just a little bit more detail, your particular school, your particular address, your particular places that you're known to be.
I know back when we were doing in-person hearings, the court would flag cases that included domestic violence issues, and usually there'd be additional court security in the courtroom. The person can get escorted to their car in the parking lot. So lots of additional safeguards. So let's go into counselors and therapists. We're kind of flying through this material, but we want to make sure we cover off everything. Karen, what do we need to know here?
Well, there are specific programs for people who have experienced intimate partner violence that offer both assessment and treatment for both adults and for children who have witnessed intimate partner violence. And again, the show notes are going to go through some of those programs. One specific one that I often refer clients to is the program at Mackenzie Health called the DASA program. And I think every single client that I've referred to that program has gotten back to me and spoken very highly of the services that are offered there. When clients are, seeing a therapist or a family professional, it's really important that clients understand that that revealing information that children have been exposed to violence or conflict is a concern that the therapist may have a duty to report that information to a Children's Aid Society. And it's just very important that to have those conversations between, at the beginning of therapy for people to understand that, because we don't want people to be blindsided when we say to them, this situation isn't safe and I need to report this to the Children's Aid Society. So we want to be upfront with those issues. Also that the therapist and client relationship needs to be negotiated in terms of what information can be shared and with whom, other than things that we have a duty to report about. So for example, if we're working, on a collaborative team, we want to be really upfront that with clients about which lawyers we're sharing information with and why, right? Again, we don't want anybody to be surprised by these issues. And in terms of, I had touched on this earlier in terms of about parents wanting therapy for their children. And most often therapists require written consent of both parents, even if a parent is not participating in the therapy or is financially contributing to the cost. Again, the therapist is going to want to reach out to that parent to get their perspective and to have a really thorough understanding of what the issues are that the child is facing. And most therapists, will reach out to that parent via email or phone and invite them to be part of a brief meet and greet so that that parent feels informed and involved in the process.
Okay, thank you, Karen. We had a question coming in on what the PAR program is. It's the Partner Assault Response Program. If you search John Howard, it'll give you, John Howard Society will give you more information. One of our audience members says there is a self-referral aspect to it. So, so I guess the implication is you don't need a referral from the criminal court. So technology, lights, camera, action, and it's on Michelle.
Hi, team. I know we are running out of time, so I'm going to speed through this really quickly. Emails and passwords. One of the first things we tell our clients, and it's actually in our initial reporting letter, get a brand new email that has in no way connected to you. You know, Michelle Mulchin at hotmail.com is not what we want. We want something brand new with a brand new password that you're never, the other party cannot guess. And have all your correspondence go through there. I can't tell you the number of times partners have been either hacked into emails, known the email passwords, or have been registered backup users. And so been able to go in through and add people's emails to their cell phones, their iPads, you know, get access to everything you're doing, everyone you're seeing. And this is not just email, social media, iCloud, your work passwords. These are all things that when you're in a relationship, you may leave these things around or your other partner may overhear them. Change everything absolutely immediately. I actually recommend a hard reset of your iPads, your iPhones, your computers. That way, if there is any spyware on there, it will be erased. I had a situation recently where someone was able to, and again, I'm a techie, but not a really in-depth techie. They were able to clone someone's phone by using their iCloud password and get confirmation of every call, every email, every text message. And that's pretty scary if you're talking about if there's intimate partner violence in this relationship. If you are either in the home or at a third-party location and you are worried that the other spouse is going to attend at your home, I always suggest that you put up cameras just from a safety perspective so you know who's coming to your home. I had a file about 2.5 years ago where mom woke up one morning and had a bunch of alerts on her phone. It turns out that the opposing party had come to her house and had come into her home at night. And she had no idea. She never woke up. You know, he had the password. Ring doorbells are really important. I really like them. Wise cameras are $35, $40, incredibly cheap, plug and play. You can, I always recommend that you have these things backed up to the cloud as well, so that if someone were to, you know, pull out the plug or cut the cord, you still have all those recordings. Make sure you have good lighting around your home, spotlights, safety lights. It's important to have. Alarm monitoring systems are also important. You know, these are just some safety things that you can have, that you can pick up on Amazon, that you could pick up at Home Depot, that are bolts, internal bolts. When you're in the home, you can bolt the door and make sure no one can enter. Low-tech things, but very important, very helpful. So in terms of recording devices, this is a really interesting and difficult part. So in family court, there's some very clear decisions that have basically said that unless they are really, truly important, that show something that the court cannot get otherwise, that recordings are not going to be used. I'm sure you all know that famous case, and forgive me, I'm not into sports, but there was that case where the girlfriend or the wife of I think it was a football player, actually had to record her boyfriend beating her in front of their small child for the team, for the courts, for anyone to believe that she was actually a victim of domestic violence. So we hope that is not the case. And absolutely, if you had a recording of that, the courts would likely view that. But more importantly, the police, these are really good recordings to give to the police. And if there are issues and if there are recordings, the police are actually the number one place to go. I actually had a situation a number of years ago where it was the male who was being abused. And no one believed him. The wife was a petite, tiny little thing, smaller than me. And you know, he was recording her because he knew what was happening. She ended up calling the police and made false allegations against him, and he was able to show the police the recordings of what had happened, and they turned around and charged her. So sometimes it is important, but we're not advocating for you to record every conversation. You know, these are really more of the really difficult cases. This is not an everyday thing. You know, the court is not going to care that you and your partner got into a verbal disagreement about should you pick up Billy at 3 o'clock or 3:30. And just be cognizant of that. Okay, thanks, Russ.
A lot to unpack there, right? You know, you're being recorded without your knowledge. You may want to record your spouse, how the family court's going to treat it. Generally, my experience is if it's an access dispute, lots of judges view that as weaponizing the recording, right? You're escalating the conflict. But thank you so much for that, Michelle. I think Shannon's going to come back on. We'll do a few more Q&A and wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. I know I've learned a lot. I hope that you've all found this helpful today, just to gain a better understanding. And we just want to thank everyone for joining us today and sending in questions. We are going to get to Q&A in just a moment. We just wanted to quickly mention that there will be a survey that pops up at the end of the webinar in your browser. So if you have the time, we welcome and appreciate any feedback you have from today's session. It allows us to grow our series. So please, if you have the time, we definitely welcome that. And just as a sign of our appreciation and just an additional resource for you, we have a complimentary e-copy of Russell's new book, Zoom Divorce. If you fill that out, we'll be providing a copy after the webinar. So thank you. So we just want to be mindful of everyone's time.
For a future event, right?
Pardon me?
And we would like suggestions for future live events.
Yes, that's really important. Actually, this program actually came from feedback from our audience. So it's definitely helpful, and it definitely allows us to put these on. So yes, please give us your feedback on that as well. So we're going to get to some Q&A. We just want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. We had a great turnout today, so we won't have a chance to get to everyone's, but hopefully a lot of your questions have been answered throughout the presentation. So one question that came in from the audience here is, in domestic situations, should you move out and sort out the separation of children, arrangement, and property? How should this affect the property division if you leave before sorting it out in court?
Right. You know, this is a tough question. I'm going to let Michelle answer the hard part of it, and I'll take the easy one. If you move out of your home, it's not going to diminish your rights to share or equalize that part of the home. So certainly in my view, your safety should be the #1 priority. But Michelle, your views on moving out before matters are settled?
Yeah, and it's so complicated, case by case. It really depends on the situation. One of the most difficult things about domestic violence is when it goes hand in hand with financial manipulation, and leaving the home does raise lots of financial issues. How are you going to pay for rent? You know, how long is it going to be until the home is either sold or paid out? So unfortunately, that's very much one of those questions that a lawyer needs to know your particular circumstances before they can give you some really good advice.
Yeah, and if it's an extreme case, a judge may make an order on notice or ex parte for interim possession and, you know, exclusive possession and a restraining order to
Absolutely.
stabilize matters. But, you know, lawyers are really effective at negotiating, you know, ground rules to get you through to the next step, whatever that's going to be, whether it's a negotiation or a settlement. So back to you, Shannon. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Another question that we have here from our audience is, I've been seeing a therapist regarding domestic violence in my relationship. I told the therapist about my own childhood trauma, and I'm worried about that information being shared with the lawyers and the court. What can I do about this?
Allison, Karen, 30 seconds or less.
Well, I think, Karen, you spoke to that in regards to the open and closed therapy earlier,
Yeah,
right? And then
yeah, that's a negotiation that, you know, is with your therapist at the beginning, you know, in terms of what information will be shared. And, you know, it's important to have those conversations and understand, you know, to have an agreement and a signed contract with your therapist about, you know, their notes not being subpoenaed to court, not being called in a trial, that type of thing, if you're concerned about that information.
Thank you.
And the
Sorry,
other thing
Al,
I
I
wanted
cut
to
you off.
add, no. And the only other thing I wanted to add that I never got to earlier was whoever's doing your screening for the intimate partner violence, that should be confidential or ought to be confidential, and then unless there is permission to share, because potentially by sharing without that person being aware, you could be placing them at further risk or their children.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have today for questions. Just wanted to thank everyone again. And we want to thank all of our panelists for today's special. Thank you to our guest speakers, our social work professionals, Allison and Karen. Thanks for joining Michelle and Russell on the panel today. And just as I mentioned before, we will be providing a follow-up email tomorrow with resources from our panelists today, so keep an eye out for that. If you do have any questions about our virtual event series or any comments for our team, please feel free to reach out to me at shannon@russellalexander.com. And just a quick note that we host our virtual event series bi-weekly on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. on a variety of family law topics. And our next presentation will discuss divorce and property sharing, and that will be on Wednesday, May 18th, but we'll be including a full list of our upcoming virtual events in the follow-up email as well for your reference. So we just want to thank everyone again for joining us today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shannon. Allison and Karen, thank you so much for your time. Michelle, as always, wonderful to do a presentation with you.
Thank you so much, everyone. You know, as we said, we should probably do a couple more on these because there is so much. There's so much that we could talk about.
Yeah.
Thank
Shannon,
you.
Great job hosting. Everybody have a good afternoon. Thanks for attending.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Wes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.